Further ado, let's get started. We're going to go through each weapon one by one here. We're going to rank this tier list based on the current stance of where everything is at in Warzone. So maybe I'll do a separate video for previous metas, but we'll talk about that another day. We're just going to rank everything like how it currently stands. That makes sense. So we got a long ways to go here. So we're just going to go top to bottom. Okay, first, so we've got the Magnum here. Dude, the Magnum sucks. I'm sorry. I can't think of any situation where I would ever use this. I mean, even with like the dual wield, it's just not worth using at all. So it's bad in my opinion. Diamante. Diamante used to be really good. Like, and I think the last time it got nerfed was kind of where they put it out for good. Where I think now even two bursting is possible. You have to hit like all headshots, which is just not practical. I mean, it's one of the better pistols, so I would say it's below average. It's not terrible by any means. It's a decent like secondary, but I mean there's definitely better options out there, you know. We got the 1911. I think this is the Modern Warfare 1911. I mean, kind of the same thing. It's just not good no matter how you build it. Even with dual wielding, the 1911s, it's never been good at all. R90. R90 used to be pretty good, actually. So there's been a few videos I've seen where people actually use the dual wield R90s, and I don't think it's terrible, so to say. So we're going to put the R90 as niche, I'd say. I think it's better than Magnum 1911, but definitely not better than Diamante. We got the 357. So I think this was the pistol that used to have this snake shot build that used to be one hit back when Verdansk like came out originally, but now it's been nerfed to the ground. So I think it's definitely not good anymore though since that nerf. It hasn't been good for years, to just say now. X16, I mean, just not good. The Magnum, so this is the Deagle. This actually got a buff recently. So I think now it's like four shots to down a player if it's all like upper torso and above. They gave it a really nice like multiplier damage buff recently. So I think it's probably, I'm gonna put it with niche. With the R90 here, definitely not like the worst one you can use. M19, these used to be really broken. The M19 pistols used to be dual pistols used to be really strong, but they nerfed that as well too. So I think it's still like kind of viable, so I'm gonna put it with niche as well too, just cause it's definitely not like the worst. Whatever. Riot Shield. So this is a weird one, right? Like, depending on the player using the Riot Shield can actually be like decent for, especially in like solos with like Hali 6 and stuns and all that stuff too. It's not garbage, but I wouldn't say it's like viable. I'm gonna just put it as like niche, you know. You can make it work depending on like how good you are with it essentially. So well, we'll leave it as niche for now. The Tundra. So I actually think the Tundra got a really decent buff in the last sniper update as well. So I personally have never liked the Tundra. There's something about the Tundra where it feels like where the reticle is, like the bullets don't seem to connect with it very well when you're trying to hit the target with it for some reason. I've always had an issue with this weapon for I don't know why. So personally, I'm just gonna say it's below average. I mean, sure, if you like it, you like it. You know, that's all I'll say there. Knife. I mean, it's kind of just it's a knife. Nothing too crazy to it. The Pellington. So the Pellington is what I refer to as the sniper that never was. This was probably the one weapon that I actually expected to match the Kar98K with the Pellington, or the Kar98K and the Swiss, but it had the same issue with the Tundra where it was like you felt like that your shots should have been headshots with this thing, but they just never connected together because I think there's just something that feels off about how like the registration is and the alignment with this weapon too. So I'm gonna put this as below average as well. It's not terrible, but personally, I can't make it work for me. The M82. So this is the Cold War Barrett 50 cal. This actually, I actually don't know if this weapon can one-shot to the head from any distance. I believe it can, but I don't know if they cap the range on it. So regardless of that though as well too, I still think this one, it just doesn't feel good to use at all. The M82 just, it's not really there. I'm just gonna put it as niche in my opinion. HDR, this is a big throwback to Verdansk. I remember that one of the last times that they adjusted the HDR, they ended up like lowering its overall like bullet drop for some reason, so they nerfed it pretty bad. But I mean, the problem nowadays is that there's other snipers that have now become much better than it because of all the buffs that like the R98K, the Type 99, and the 3-line and the Garand received. So I mean, the HDR has just kind of fallen off, and I think it's now below average, unfortunately. You can make it work, but I don't think it's the best. AX50, kind of the same thing here too. With the HDR, I think the last time they adjusted it, they just ended up giving it a slight nerf to its range overall. But I've never liked the AX50. I personally think the AX50 is pretty garbage. Like, I've never thought it's been good. Dragunov, I mean, let's not even talk about that. The Rytek Amr. I'm sorry. This was one of the most disappointing weapons that they released. It on paper looked really cool, but in practice it felt awful to use. There's not one redeeming quality about this weapon. The only time that this weapon was actually kind of decent was when it first came out, and that was when like we were still kind of in this RPG rocket launcher meta at the time because of how like vehicles are being utilized in Verdansk. But ever since that we shipped it out, after the first month of this weapon's release, I mean, it's just never like had a purpose anywhere else across the board. Okay, the SPR. This was objectively one of the coolest weapons that they ever came out with too. If you played with the SPR in week 1, that was when they had the infinite bullet hit scan. Probably one of the best weeks of multiplayer that I ever had for me personally when this weapon came out. Nowadays, I think it's viable. I think now you could definitely use the SPR and definitely do some like, you know, quick scoping with it, whatever, on Rebirth or whatever. But I still think it's definitely decent to use. So you can definitely, I gave it a check in the viable section there. MW Kar98K. So with all the marksman rifles, they adjusted and it increased the one-shot range. I don't think it's absolute meta. It obviously was absolute meta for the longest time, but I think because they nerfed the one-shot range, well, this is subjective, right? If you were to compare this like Caldera or this list from Caldera to Rebirth, it would probably be a little different. But I think overall though, I think it's just top tier, essentially, because the fact that it was a one-shot at any range anymore just kind of puts out of the absolute meta category for me. Crossbow, I'm just gonna put this as niche. I mean, like, so the one thing about the crossbow that people probably didn't realize is this thing was actually really good in titanium trials, because the explosive round, if you tag the opponent once with the explosive round, it would instantly down them, like regardless of how much health or plates they had in there. So the crossbow is really good for titanium trials, but I think overall it's just really niche in general. So the Carbine sucks. They just don't know what to do with it, honestly. I don't know. They've never like been able to make that weapon work for whatever reason. Sigma 2, just, I mean, it's the Sigma 2. It is what it is. The EBR. There was a point in time where this weapon had like, there was like a 2-shot build or 3-shot build with it, but I think it was like clickbait with the people and no plates on whatever. But the EBR handling is just awful. Like, I've always thought that this weapon needed some kind of recoil adjustment, but they just never gave it that for whatever reason. I have no idea why. So I think it's still garbage. If they adjusted the recoil on the EBR now, I think it would probably be I would put it at below average. That's all I think it needs. The SKS, so I've tried to make this work, but the handling, like the EBR, is just not there. There's just no good way to make this weapon work without it feeling super clunky and uncomfortable. So again, I think the SKS is pretty garbage. The Cold War AUG. So they recently, I believe they buffed it the last time that they adjusted. They gave it I actually think they gave it a damage buff. I don't think it was a drastic damage buff though, to where it was gonna all of a sudden start two bursting again. I think what people don't realize about the tactical rifles back then was what really revolutionized them was, aside from the fire rate and the damage profiles, the old Axial Arms 3X optic used to be like a massive sniper scope, and you had like 8 or 9 times like optical zoom on the opponents there, so you were just easily able to lace kids from any distance at all. So I think nowadays it's just niche. I definitely don't think it's nowhere near as good as it used to be, even with the buffs it's received. Because what they did was they nerfed the titanium barrel, and then the recoil magnitude, which is the intensity of the weapon's base recoil gun kick, is way too high now to make the shots land consistently. They basically made it so there's no way for you to consistently land all 3 bullets in the same location or same multipliers at the same time. M16, I think that the base gun kick on this weapon is a little more forgiving than the AUG, but it falls into the same problem where it's like the damage profile is not there to make it consistently work across the board, so it goes into the niche categories again as well. The DMR, I'm sure all of you watching this remember this dreadful era of the DMR zone. When the DMR was meta, that was actually probably when my longest break of Warzone, where I was just simply, I didn't play the game for a whole month, I think, because of how unforgiving it was to be able to like get anything done. Rebirth, Verdansk, it was just not a fun time to play it. Nowadays, I actually think it's not terrible. I think it's below average. Definitely one of the better single fire weapons that you can use now, for sure, especially in Rebirth. So definitely give it a try. If you haven't like used it in a while, you may be surprised. Type 63. So the Type 63 was actually slept on for a long time, and then eventually it came to light, and then they nerfed it to the ground, obviously. But this was kind of like the mini DMR 2.0, I'd say, where people may not remember the Type 63 meta, where it was actually like really strong up close, with like an SMG build or whatever. But they nerfed it. I think it's just kind of niche nowadays. Actually, I'm not even going to say that. I think it's just straight up garbage now. I might experiment with it again later and see how it feels. It's been a little while. M60. I mean, slow fire rate, bad mobility. I can't think of a time when the M60 was ever like super dominant. It's always had like really good damage, but the handling was just awful on it. So I think it's pretty bad. There's no reason to use this weapon at all, in my opinion. The Stoner. The Stoner used to be absolutely cracked out to oblivion there. I remember there was a point in time where one of the barrels that like increased your ADS firing move speed gave you like infinite bullet. There was actually like a mini hit scan build that people didn't know about back then when the Stoner came out. The Stoner was one of the hidden metas that was evident or going around at the time during the Cold War FFAR AUG meta. Nowadays though, I think it's just kind of niche. Like it's not like, sure, if you pick it up maybe you'll get like 1 or 2 with it though, but you're gonna lose to other weapons essentially with this thing, so it's not good at all. RPD. So the RPD actually has pretty good handling. The reload time on the RPD, if you didn't know, if you put on the fast mag for this, you actually have like an insane amount of time to skip on the reload animation for it. Like you can literally cancel that reload animation like 3 seconds before it finishes with the RPD fast mag. It's actually like really OP. The handling recoil is not bad. I think it's actually like Is it viable or below average? I'm actually gonna say that the RPD is viable, believe it or not. Give this a try. You might be surprised with how it does. On Rebirth, mainly Rebirth. I don't think you can use it on Caldera, obviously. The Holger. I mean, just what do I even need to say? There's no barrel that gives it any kind of range or bullet velocity increase or recoil control. It's just it's a multiplayer weapon, you know. There was never a time where you wanted to use the Holger. It was just kind of like one of those wasted weapons, you know. The RPG. I mean, it's just kind of niche, I think. Like, yeah, it one shots, but you know, it's just an RPG. It is what it is there. SA-87. So the best way to describe this weapon is I spent a lot of time researching this weapon because it had very interesting properties around the profile for this weapon. I refer to this as the LMG Amax. The recoil control of this is actually similar to the Amax. The damage profile kind of matches what it used to be. The problem with this weapon is the mobility is way worse than you could imagine it. With how, like, even with a 50 round mag, I mean, you're moving like a turtle with it. It's really slow, but the damage is pretty good. I think that the S87 is actually below average. It's definitely not like trash by any means, but it's definitely it's got a high skill cap to use. Like you have to really, like, you know what you're doing with it essentially. The MG34. So even if you, like, obviously this weapon has really bad recoil, everybody knows that, but so the only thing you can really do is try to, like, convert to like a close range, mid-range LMG. Even when you stack out like attachments that try to help the mobility, it doesn't matter. It's just the handling is just horrible in every way, shape, and form. So the MG34 has just always been really trash in my opinion. The fin. So I think the fin, to this day, still has like the highest or the fastest theoretical TTK. The problem is achieving that TTK is just not. It's a non-realistic TTK, if that makes sense. So I think it's still like fun to use. It's definitely. I don't think it's garbage. Is it niche or below average? I'm gonna say it's below average. The chainsaw build that you can stack with this thing is actually like kind of decent for like close quarters on like Rebirth mainly, so I'm going to give it below average there too. Definitely will lose to other weapons though, that's for sure. The PKM. Listen, the PKM, the biggest drawback everybody knows is the mobility. But let me tell you something though. The PKM has one of the most kind of unique uses for it. So like you can make the PKM work in many different ways as well too, right? Like if you just want to be a basic LMG with 100 rounds, mid-range combat, that's totally fine. Or if you want to really kind of, the other way to make the weapon work is if you put on like 200 round mag, FMJ, combat scout, and just start lacing people through walls. There's a lot of ways to make the PKM work, and the damage profile is actually really good still. The recoil can be a little wonky at times, but once you learn how to master the PKM, I think it's pretty good. I used it in Titanium Trials and had really good success with it, so I definitely would say give it a try again if you haven't used it well. I think it's actually pretty competitive. You can do well with it still. The M91. So my issue with this weapon is I personally think that they needed to increase the fire rate of the M91 a bit more. I felt like it was just, it shoots too slow to make it work at all. It shoots too slow based on the damage profile that it currently has and has always had as far as I'm concerned. The range isn't terrible by any means though, but there's just never been a situation to where it's like ever going to win realistically in certain fights. If they gave it a fire rate buff, it might be a little bit better, but until they do that, I think it's just gonna be really bad. The Bruin. The Bruin was my favorite meta. Hands down, all across the board. I loved the Bruin when it came out originally. It was an absolute monster. It was a cannon, just lacing people across the map on Verdansk. Nowadays, there's obviously that blueprint, Spoiled Rotten, that you can get in Rebirth upon dropping into the map there, which is actually pretty good. I think, is the Bruin viable? So depending on how you kit the depending on like your skill level, I think the Bruin is viable. It's just your decision to use the 60 round mag or not is up to you, but that obviously changes how the recoil is affected. It's still pretty good. It's just the aim assist of the Modern Warfare weapons though is not as good as the Vanguard weapons, just based on my experience with testing different properties out. So definitely you can make it work if you're a good player, basically. The Gallo, SPAS 12. So in case, here's a fun fact for you. I remember True Game Data actually said at one point where on Brazilian servers, the Gallo was a massive problem where apparently every single Rebirth lobby on Brazilian servers was just people using the Gallo 12. It was super toxic. I never had that experience personally, but I mean, if TGD said it happened, I believe him. It used to be very annoying to go against though. I never used it personally because my problem with it is that it's the single fire shotgun, and your sprint to fire thing, if you use automatic tac sprint, always cancel and got in the way, so it's very annoying to use. Nowadays, I think it's just kind of niche. I mean, it's not special by any means. It's just kind of like whatever, it's there. The Street Sweeper. Let me tell you something. So the Gallo 12, I'm only gonna put it at niche because it still has potential to get a kill. This thing, the last time they adjusted the shotguns, I mean, boys, they ruined it to the ground. I don't think the Street Sweeper is good at all anymore. I mean, you pick up the Brutalizer in Rebirth there, man, it shoots pebbles. Unless like you literally land every single pellet on the target, you're not gonna do anything with it. Not very good. The Howard, trash. I mean, it's never been good at all. Like, I used to dread picking this weapon up in Rebirth when Cold War weapons were ground loot, so just never had a good experience with the Howard across the board. They never ever like changed or anything like that, so it's just never been good. BLK Rogue. So there was recently they actually buffed the VOK at one point in a patch this year, which made it incredibly powerful. There was a 2-shot build going around for like a week or so on Rebirth with the Dragon's Breath rounds, but then they ended up nerfing it and reworking the weapon a bit more, so that build doesn't exist anymore. Nowadays, though, I think it's just kind of niche. It didn't get like as brutal of a treatment as like some of the shotguns did when they got nerfed, but I think it's just kind of niche nowadays. The slug rounds on it though, you can use slug rounds on the VLK to still like do some decent damage. You have to land the shots, obviously. M79. I mean, it's just trash grenade launcher. It's just kind of like whatever. It's never been good. 725. So I think his name is Gloomtoth. He actually found out that they secretly buffed the reload speed on sleight of hand for the 725 at some point this year. I don't know like when that video came out, like a few months ago I think though, but they actually for some reason, see, they make a lot of subtle changes, and I'll talk about another one here pretty soon that I noticed that no one talks about, that no one like really picked up on. But they make all these like weird subtle changes. They don't ever tell us for some reason, no idea why. I think the 725 though is just kind of niche. It obviously has like that slug build you can use for like the 2-shot potential. So that's pretty fun and cool to use, but you know, it is what it is. Origin 12. There was nothing more dreadful than running up a flight of stairs in Verdansk just to get to the top and just see a 4-stacking team with Origin 12s bombard you and the rest of your squad with these shotgun pellets. I mean, my god, that was a very painful meta to go through if you played it. Not fun at all. Obviously, since then they've nerfed it though. I actually think it's pretty bad now. I tried it recently and it's just not good. There's just no reason to use the Origin at all anymore. The R90 Shotgun. So the R90 was meta for a pretty long time in Verdansk. If you don't know this though, the Dragon's Breath rounds that now exist in the R9 were actually added later on at some point. I think it was like season 4 of Modern Warfare, season 5 when they added the Dragon's Breath rounds. They were not actually on the weapons, not if it was attachment in the beginning of the game. So, and since then though, I don't know if they nerfed the damage on it in the most recent shotgun patch, but it was actually still pretty. They never touched it. They never nerfed it. What they did end up doing, though, was they ended up buffing EOD, so the R90 Shotgun meta kind of somewhat got nerfed in a way. I think it's just kind of niche nowadays. There's just other things that are going to, like, do a little bit better than that, though. But, you know, it's still, like, a fun weapon to use every once in a while. The Model 680. It just sucks. It's just never been good, you know. I don't. It doesn't matter how you build it out. Like, it's got so many different unique, like, conversion. The cool thing about this weapon, though, I think, is I like how there was a lot of different, like, options for magazines. Like, there was the increased ammo capacity. There was, like, the slug rounds. There was the dragons, but then there was, like, some weird, like, slug fire round that you could put on it or something like that. It was pretty cool to see how, like, many ways you could build the weapon, though, but there was never, like, a good, like, foundational meta build for it. So more of a multiplayer weapon, that's for sure. The Jak 12. This is my favorite shotgun personally. Well, maybe it is. I'm not entirely sure about that. The Jak 12. So obviously this got nerfed too, but I don't think it's as bad as the Street Sweeper. I definitely think the Jak 12 is just below average now. And the only reason I say that is because what you can do with this nowadays is if you put on the slug round with VLK 3.0 optic, you get headshots with this thing. You'll, like, down people in 2 to 3 bullets with the slug build. It's kind of like a mini sniper rifle essentially. So give that build a try. It's actually pretty fun. You may not get many kills though, but it's just kind of like funny to see, like, you know, someone knocking you in the head with 1 bullet or whatever. But it is what it is. AK-74U. There's been a lot of conversation about the AK-74U recently. People have been saying that it actually has, like, the most consistent TTK all around at the moment. My problem with it, though, is that mobility is not very good no matter how you deck it out. It's just kind of, like, feels, like, clunky and slow to use. I think what holds this weapon back, though, it's obviously, like, an all-around good base weapon, but there's going to be situations where that's not always going to, like, win every gunfight. It's just too average, but it's not trash instantly. So I'm going to actually put this as viable. I don't think it's competitive or top tier by any means, though, but I think with what people have been saying about it, I definitely think it's, like, a viable option that you can use now and, like, do decent with it, though. You may, like, drop, like, a 30 bomb with it, but maybe we'll get, like, 10 to 15 and call it good there, you know? Milano. Personally, the Milano got nerfed way too hard when they last adjusted. I remember the Milano nerf, the last Milano nerf that came out with it. I thought, whew, like, I mean, they just ripped it into the ground. They didn't want people, they wanted to kind of kill that, AR meta that was going on with the Milano, so they wanted to bring it back into more of, like, the close range, you know, meta, essentially. Not meta, just, like, kind of purpose, whatever. Nowadays, I mean, there's the Red Room Blueprint, which is decent to pick up, but I think it's below average. The only reason I say that now is because, like, the recoil is still pretty easy to use on it, and so it's not like the hardest weapon to control, but definitely doesn't have the damage profile like it used to, that's for sure. LC-10. This weapon got hit way too hard. I mean, LC-10 when it first came out was, like, on par with the Modern Warfare MP5. I mean, I used to love going back and forth between LC-10 and MP5, and I was having a blast with it. It was really fun to use, and for whatever reason they just absolutely gutted its damage profile now, and it just sucks. Like, yeah, it has pretty good bullet velocity, but that doesn't do much nowadays, though, with how people stack up, like, mobility builds and stuff like that for some of the better SMGs. So I don't think it's garbage. I think it's just kind of niche now. It's definitely not gonna beat other weapons, that's for sure. So it's unfortunate to see what they did with LC-10. Maybe they'll give it some love before they make another round of adjustments, if they ever do again. So we'll have to wait and see. The KSP. I mean, just again, like, I think they buffed this weapon once. This is a weird, like, a burst SMG was never going to be good. Like, you could kind of tell, like, when this weapon first came out, like, a burst SMG, like, that's never going to be, like, strong, and that's still held to be true to this day. So it's just kind of, I think it's just really bad all across the board. The MAC-10. So the MAC-10 now, Uh, Personally, I think it's competitive. I think the Mac-10 is still competitive. One thing that you probably do notice though is when I end up losing to this weapon, there's a lot of casual players that still gravitate towards it because of the high fire rate, and it's just because the weapon has like 1100 RPM or something like that. It caters to a lot of like newbier players, if that makes sense, because of just how, like, you know, you just shoot straight and it just goes through them and it just like deletes them. So, and they buffed it recently too, so it's actually pretty good now. I don't know why they decided to buff it in the last round of updates though, but you know, it is what it is. So the Strela. So in the time of making this video, there has been a TikTok going around where people are now launching loadout crates into the sky and ocean with the Strela P. It is hilarious. I definitely want to try it at some point. It's definitely like a niche weapon though, but I want to specifically like coin this weapon as being like a very, just give this a go, pick this up, go find someone's load crate and shoot a rocket and just see what happens, and you'll get a laugh out of it. So I love what people found out with the Strela, so I'm glad to see that's getting some kind of form of attention, some more personality to the weapon, if that makes sense. Colder P5. The last time they touched the Colder P5, or they touched the Colder P5, they actually ended up buffing it, giving it, I think they buffed its neck multiplier, maybe its damage range, something like that. I think it's viable. I don't think it's trash by any means. So I definitely there's better options than it, that's for sure, but you could definitely still run it nowadays and do decent with it. Kind of like with this AK-74, you put up like 10 to 15 with it. I don't think it's like 20 bomb potential, but definitely still like a good option to run based on like the last round of adjustments it had. Bullfrog. Bullfrog's had a very, very interesting history. It used to have like an insane headshot multiplier, and that was untouched for a long time. When you combine that with like the 65, 85 round mag, I mean, this thing used to be really, really good. Then they ended up like obviously nerfing all that. Then there was the weird glitch where there was actually like a tracer round pack that was causing the weapon audio to appear or to come through your headset or whatever. And that didn't get fixed for a long time. The blueprint for the Bullfrog that was causing that was actually banned in custom tourneys for a short period of time. It was pretty crazy to see when this was going down. So I think nowadays though, I actually think it's pretty viable. I think just with the large magazine is pretty good. The recoil is not too bad. The key to this weapon though is to make sure you consistently land the upper chest and above, and if you do that, you're probably gonna win most of your gunfights. I'm not sure if it would beat out like you know, the Raw or the Armaguerra right now, but it's definitely viable, that's for sure. Fennec actually got a buff in the most recent update, I believe. They ended up buffing its, I don't remember what they buffed for it. Oh, they buffed its like lower limb multiplier or something like that, like the right foot and the left arm, something kind of weird like that. So the Fennec is pretty good in solos and duos, obviously, but I think in trios and quads it becomes a little more difficult to use. So if you're like a solo player, the Fennec is definitely like a pretty good option for you. I think it's hard to say if this is considered viable because this is situational, obviously. I think depending on what mode you play, you can put this in viable. For me personally, just based on where everything stands collectively, if I'm comparing this to simply other weapons, I think the Fennec is just a little below average. Definitely not trash by any means, though. You can definitely like still do okay with it. Not like, you know, 15 plus, but it's all right. So the ISO. So the ISO has pretty good bullet velocity. I think the thing with this weapon is that it's a very bouncy weapon. You know, no matter how many recoil reduction attachments you put on the ISO, I've just never found it to be a very comfortable weapon to use. It doesn't have the damage profile for that. It has good bullet velocity, but there's no like the purpose this weapon serves is just so isolated. No pun intended there. I mean, it's just kind of niche, you know. It's just kind of like there. You're never gonna think, "Ooh, I got an ISO." You know, it's not what you're thinking about that. So it is what it is. MP7. A lot of people still like to rock the MP7. It's an OG MW weapon. It's still like, I mean, I actually think it's still pretty viable. I think the MP7 has just historically been like a solid weapon. It's definitely it's definitely a weapon that caters pretty well to new players coming to the game. I see a lot of low level counts that are always using an MP7, so you know, I kind of think that's where it fits though. If you're a starter player, MP7 is a good choice for you. It's just solid across the board. You know, I think it's still definitely viable. That's for sure. The Modern Warfare AUG. I think the Modern Warfare AUG got nerfed pretty badly last time because of just when you stacked on those NATO rounds, it had like a pretty strong damage profile. So and they end up gutting that. Problem with the AUG is that when you do stack it for like max DPS, it just doesn't. The mobility is just very bad. I think unfortunately because if they didn't nerf its damage profile, I would put it below average. But I think it's just kind of niche now with what they've did to the magazines and whatnot. The Striker, so they buffed it. I think they buffed its headshot damage, and I think it might be I think it's probably the only time it's been buffed for that matter. I can't think of another situation or another patch that went on where they actually buffed it. I think the Striker's just kind of niche. I mean, even with the buff it got, it's not spectacular. It still has really bad handling, and it's just there's just no good reason. There's no real reason to use this still. You know, it's just a throwback weapon to Modern Warfare 2 and UMP. You know, the Uzi. I have always tried to make the Uzi work. I mean, I every time that the Uzi got buffed, I got really excited because I love the Uzi. But I mean, you know, I think today the only way to make the Uzi work, or one of the better ways to make it work, is there is like a pretty good like low recoil hipfire build that you could stack on. But even then, it's the problem with it only is 32 rounds. It's not a whole lot. In solos, I think it might be okay, but unfortunately, I think it's just kind of niche. I don't think it's at all like decent. Essentially, maybe you could say it's below average. Actually, let me think about this for a second. You know what? I take that back. I actually think the Uzi is below average. If you are a decent player, you can definitely make the Uzi work, but it doesn't have like that 20 bomb potential, you know. So definitely like a fun weapon to kind of use and mess around with, though. That's for sure. P90. I love the P90. The P90, fun fact, has the highest bullet velocity in the SMG category in the game, depending on the build that you do. It gets up to like 1900 or something like that, which is ridiculous. It's almost like pure hit scan, essentially. They actually gave the P90 a buff. I might be a little biased here, but I actually think the P90 is pretty competitive now. If you're a good player and you understand how the P90 works, and you just have like really good you know, just awareness and predictions of what players are going to do, the P90 is going to do really well for you, especially because they buffed its damage profile. They just made it so it's just more comfortable and more forgiving, like in all ranges, essentially. The only time that the P90 is probably not good is up close. But depending on your build, if you have like a really good mobility build, you can definitely like you know, try to get the edge in the opponent there if they're using like the Raw or the Blixen or the Armored Gear or something like that. So, but I think the P90 is very competitive now because it's the only SMG in the game that I feel like I can use at any range and still like get hit markers and tag damage on, essentially. So, give the P90 a try. I really recommend it. Oh boy, the OG Modern Warfare MP5. I mean, it was king of the ring for God knows how long. It's the king of TikTok. I can say that comfortably for sure. So, I think, I mean, just based on like what they've done with it collectively, with all the buffs and nerfs, If you put the 30 round mag on the MW5, I think it's definitely viable. I don't think it's competitive anymore because just there's not enough. The best way to make it work is to use the 30 round mag. That's for sure. That's how you get the guaranteed down. Problem is that's not enough ammo to take on multiple targets at once. So I just think it's barely underneath that competitive spot, but it's definitely viable. So that's for sure. Pila, just kind of like it's the Pila. The Bison. Bison is very fun to use. I've always really I kind of wish I used this weapon a lot sooner. People used to trash on it for the longest time. That was when that's like for dance days when we had MP5 as like the meta for the longest time. But I think now it's below average or viable. I don't know. There's a lot of good players that can make the Bison work. I'm actually gonna say it's below average. The only reason I'm gonna say it's below average is because if you do go up against like one of the Vanguard SMGs, you're more than likely going to lose the fight. But if you're like a really good player, I definitely think this slips into the viable category. But for the overall purpose of just comparing gun stats to one another, I think the Bison is just below average, unfortunately. A good player can make it work though, that's for sure. The Krig 6. Oh, man, the Krig meta was so boring. I mean, you loaded up Rebirth and it was just nothing but Krig 6s everywhere. I mean, it was probably one of the most noob friendly metas we ever saw in Warzone. It was unbelievable to see how a lot of the COD creators were complaining to heaven on earth with the Krig meta, and I completely understand why. Nowadays, I mean, I think the last adjustment that went out for was I think they ended up buffing its mid damage range, so not like a crazy increase of damage, or nothing like too substantial, but I think it's just below average. It's not spectacular by any means. There's definitely better options, that's for sure. But you can pick it up and just kind of mess around with it and do whatever. But it is what it is. It's fine. The Pharah. I used to love the Pharah. The Pharah was actually my old PR was 29, and I actually I broke that with the Pharah back in Rebirth, season 4. I don't remember. Whenever the Pharah came out was when I dropped that 29 kill game on my YouTube channel, but. Now, I think the Pharah got a damage range buff recently, which is pretty good. See, and when you use it nowadays, it feels like a hit marker machine, unfortunately, because of the health buff. I think, unfortunately, I want to put it in viable, though, but I think with just how things are nowadays, if you want to make this viable, you really have to land your headshots and neck and torso shots with the Pharah. And the recoil can be a little shifty from side to side, so it's important to make sure you land every bullet possible, but that only really good players are going to be able to do that. So for now, I think the Pharah is just below average, though. But you could definitely still make it work. Same thing with the Krig. XM4. XM4. This weapon's had a lot of different uses. People used to build it as an SMG. It was really good for distance, and I remember Raven was having a hard time balancing it because people kept finding different ways to make it work, and they didn't want to completely gut the weapon. It went through a lot of changes over the course of its time. Probably one of the most tuned weapons that we'd seen actually is the XM4. I mean, I think I gotta just put it below average here again too. It's all these cold weapons are kind of falling in the same area. The same situation where it's you can make it work, but it just kind of depends on depending on how you deck this weapon out is gonna depend on what kind of kill count you're going for. If you're going 15 plus, definitely don't use SMG. If you use it like an SMG, maybe you can get 5 to 10, something like that. But I think it's just okay now. FFAR. Yep. You remember the FFAR meta? It was very painful. It had unbelievable like strafe movement when it came out with the Raider stock, which also the main reason why the FFAR meta really shifted off for good, even after all the nerfs it got, it was still strong. The Raider stock nerf that they applied before Vanguard came out was really what sealed the deal for all the Cold War weapons, unfortunately, because they nerfed the strafe speed by like 25%, and that just gutted the mobility. I mean, you could think about like how heavy of a hit that was. Like, yeah, Raider stock nerf that went out to all the AR weapons on Cold War ARs was what kind of sealed the deal for that. But I think nowadays, I think they buffed it not too long ago with its damage range. I actually think now, if you're playing Rebirth and you have like a mid-range build with this, I actually think the FFAR is pretty viable still. You can do pretty well with it. If you're engaging people in like prison cells or something, or in decon or chemical, this weapon has a lot of good like one-on-one situations in Rebirth mainly, so I definitely think it's still viable, that's for sure. So give it a try and see if you like it or not. QBZ. QBZ, you want to talk about a weapon that had strafe speed? Man, the QBZ had a lot of it. This weapon, the movement speed on this weapon was crazy for a long time. And then they finally caught on and hit it to the ground, because people were starting to figure out that it was pretty good for mobility. But then they quickly adjusted and they ended up like tuning a couple things down for it. So, I mean, I don't think the QBZ is bad. I think it's just kind of below average again. It's kind of a trend here. All these Cold War ARs are really falling down. I do think the FFAR kind of stands out in its own, and to an extent, though. The fire rate of the FFAR alone is kind of like what separates it from the rest of these here. And just based on like how you use the weapon is what really dictates like what I'm also kind of basing off of here. So, Groza. So they buffed the Groza recently. I tried it. I'm going to be honest with you here. It didn't feel that bad. I know, seems weird, right? If you're using this on Rebirth or Fortune's Keep, I actually had a pretty good experience with the Groza. The recoil was not that bad. The damage buff they get, after the buff, I could feel the difference with the Groza, because they buffed its far damage range. I could definitely feel the impact of that extra, damage point per bullet on there with how it was affecting my shots. So it's definitely decent to use now, that's for sure. And also, like, user friendliness is pretty good with the recoil too. So the Cold War AK. Talk about another weapon that's gone through a history of changes. This one is another one like the XM4 where they just could not figure out what to do with it, because it was meta for a long time. I personally never liked this weapon though. I never liked the handling of the Cold War AK. I just never gravitated towards it like at all. The only thing I would use it for is maybe like I would stack it as like a mid-range SMG on Rebirth, but I personally never liked the Cold War AK, even though it had like a really good hit bar, a good damage multiplier. So I think now, I think it's just below average. Kind of same thing with all these other weapons here. I mean, it's just with the way the recoil pattern is now, you're never going to consistently hit shots with the Cold War AK anymore. It's just not possible, and that's what kind of hurts. That's what hurts the TTK more than anything else, regardless of its damage profile. So, the Scar. I can't tell you how many times we have told them, give the Scar a bigger mag, give the Scar a bigger mag, and they never did it. And it's not like they can't do that. I believe at one point the RAM mag size was only 45 bullets, and they ended up buffing it to 50, so we know that they can change the mag size of these weapons. It's just they never decided to for some reason. I have no idea why. But it's very fun to use, that's for sure. I do think, though, unfortunately, that the Scar is kind of niche in its own way. To put it at below average is kind of excessive, in my opinion, because in order to make this weapon work, you do need to be a good player. A casual player is not gonna do very well with the Scar, unless you hit like all your shots consistently. So if you're a good player, this can definitely go to like below average or even viable for that matter. But for overall though, it's just the 30-round mag is what holds back more than anything else. So the Ram 7. I've never liked the Ram. I know a lot of people do. I know a lot of people, especially KBM players, especially Tifu used to make the Ram look unbelievably amazing in Verdansk, and I don't know how he did it. Definitely a KBM weapon, that's for sure, though. But I think nowadays, I just can't get a feel for the weapon. I don't think it's bad by any means. I'm actually going to say that it's below average. I know some people do make this weapon work, so it's definitely not like the worst of the worst. So, I don't know, give it a try and see if you like it. Maybe definitely better more of like a mid-range weapon. Don't use it for long range. That's way too hard to use with the recoil. Joker, I mean, it's the Joker. So, not much to say there too. It's funny to lock onto vehicles, make people use their flares. So if in Caldera or whatever. So, just kind of a fun niche weapon to use. The M4A1. So the thing with this weapon is, I think I'm gonna say it's viable, and here's why. The recoil is a little heavy, if that makes sense. When you stack it for long range. But once you use it enough, you'll kind of figure out and get the feel for it. It doesn't have a horrible damage profile. It's definitely like somewhat, decent to use. But the thing and reason why I'm putting it viable is that it has there's a lot of ways to build the M4. It has that one barrel where it converts it to like some SMG variant or whatever, where it's like sound suppression, bullet velocity. Then there's the fact that there's that 32 round fire rate mag, which is definitely good up close. So because there's a lot of different ways to build the M4, I definitely think that anybody can kit it out to where it'll do well for you in some way, shape, or form, or in any fashion for that matter, because of like the the layers it has to it behind its different attachments and properties. So the FR, or the FAMAS, I guess you could say. I mean, there was like that single fire quote unquote meta build that went around for a little while. I think Teep was one that kind of figured that out, and that was kind of debunked quickly, though it wasn't that good. But I mean, the FR just sucks. It's never been good at all, unfortunately. So I would have liked for this weapon to be pretty decent, but it is what it is. It's never been good. So the Odin. The Odin is actually very fun to use. For whatever reason, people think that when you're using the Odin, you're cheating. When I was running the Odin in Rebirth like a year ago, like a lot of my death comms were like, oh, he's cheating, he's using the Odin. Like, I don't know what it is about the Odin specifically. If it has like the same kind of vibes like the FL, the DMR, where it's like slow fire rate. Because it's such like a massive like damage profile, that's why people probably think that you're cheating, whatever. Because like if you're laying consistent shots with it, it's like, oh, kind of sus, whatever. But I think the Odin is kind of niche though. There's definitely like you could build like an SMG, maybe like mess around with it with mid range, but it's definitely not like something you'd ever want to like mainly or main in that regard. So the M13, I know a lot of people still really like the M13. I personally it's not for me. I know KBM players probably do pretty good with it, but I think unfortunately I'm just going to put it below average. So maybe you can make it work, but I think it's a day's generation of Warzone, of the Warzone meta, though. It's going to get outclassed by a lot of other weapons, unfortunately. So the Kilo meta, Season 5 for Verdansk. I mean, it was the king. It was one of the kings back then. So I think nowadays the Kilo is still pretty good. If a new player were to come to me and ask what AR should I use, I would definitely recommend the Kilo still. It's one of the more friendly weapons that players can pick up now and still do decent with, to help like learn the basics and foundation of the game with how like recoil patterns work and whatnot. Personally, on like Rebirth, I think the Kilo is still pretty viable. Just because of its low recoil and ease of use, you could definitely still pretty good. You could put up 15 plus with the Kilo, that's for sure nowadays. The Growl. they gave the Growl some love recently, which I was pretty happy to see. So I definitely think the Growl fits into the viable category once again. That's for sure. The Modern Warfare AK. Man, the handling on the MWAK has just it's never been good. I've always felt like that they've needed to adjust the recoil a little bit on this weapon. I just don't. No one's ever like said, "Ooh, MWAK is like definitely like a good option. Give it a try." Like, it has a decent damage profile, but the handling on the MWAK is just it's not good. I actually think the weapon just kind of sucks overall. There's just not a reason to use it. Actually, well, okay, the only counter argument to this is that there is like a 39 round millimeter mag that you can put to convert like an SMG, but the problem is that the skill needed to make that consistently work is pretty high. I think I would just rather put it as a niche weapon, and that's only if you build it that way. Aside from that, the regular version is just awful. Like, don't ever use MWAK, at least in my opinion. The AN94. I was very disappointed with how this weapon came out upon its release. I was expecting it to be pretty good, and it just never upheld that standard at all whatsoever. So I was sad to see that it definitely is not like a weapon that it's, you know, ever desired or wanted to be used. It has like that 2-burst gimmicky build, which is pretty cool, I guess, and maybe you can like just, you know, single fire tap with the 2-burst method or variant on there. But I think nowadays, man, I think the N94 just sucks. It's just garbage. It's not worth using like at all, no matter like how good or bad you are. It just doesn't have the damage profile for it. The Amax, yes, this was the Season 4 King. Season 3 and Season 4 King back in Modern Warfare. It was really, really good. Even through Cold War, it was still really strong, and they didn't really touch it that much. Like this year, at some point, they ended up gutting its profile completely, and then they ended up reverting it back to it. So now it's definitely not like I would put it at garbage if they didn't recently revert some of the nerfs they gave it, but I think it's just kind of niche nowadays. It's just not the same as it used to be. If you're a really good player, maybe you can make it work though, but it doesn't have that 20 bomb potential anymore, at least in my opinion. So the FAL, I used to really like the FAL. They gave the FAL a really nasty buff back in Verdansk, and it was very powerful for a short time before they ended up nerfing it and taking off that close range multiplier, sadly. So the FAL is kind of like is probably the hacker's #1 choice of weapon, just because of like the headshot damage and all that. But I think now, I think it just falls into the niche category like these others. It just doesn't have like that insane, like, I don't know how many bullets is to kill nowadays, maybe like 6 or 7. Definitely like not forgiving at all. If you miss one bullet at all, then you're pretty much screwed if you're going against anything else, essentially. Modern Warfare RPG, this used to be like the secondary meta back in OG Verdansk, so but nowadays just kind of like, you know, it's the RPG. It's just kind of garbage in that regard. The AS Val. So similar to the Fennec here, I think the ASVAL falls in that same category. Depends on the mode you're playing. If you're playing solos and duos, the ASVAL is really good. Trios and quads definitely has a higher skill cap because of just how you know, how you have to operate or how you manage your bullets per mag. So I think collectively though, so because I think I'm actually gonna put it as viable. The reason I say that over the Fennec is that like the ASVAL has potential to get 2 downs in 1 mag. I don't think the Fennec has that capability, unless the target or unless one of the players is already at like half health or something like that. But I think the ASVAL can still fully down a player, can still down 2 players in 1 mag as long as you manage your shots correctly. Don't know if the Fennec can do that now because the fire rate's too fast. So The Cold War PPSH. So I don't know what the standings are right now, but I think that the Cold War PPSH matches the MAC-10's mobility, depending on how you build it. I do know that a lot of people have spoke highly of this weapon with how its mobility is. The handling's not too bad. I don't think the damage profile is that great. I don't think it was ever meta at any point. It was definitely like decent and viable, but I think nowadays I'm probably gonna put it at below average. You can make it work, you know, if you're a good player, but I don't think it's like special by any means. I've never like had like the need and urge to go and use it, especially in today's generation of Warzone. So the Swiss. The Swiss, I think, has fallen off pretty heavily. I don't see many people use it anymore, which is kind of strange to me. I think most people just kind of stuck with the R98, and I think it's because the Swiss usage is just not as high as it used to be. I don't know like what the range is now compared to the R98, but I'm gonna say that the Swiss is just kind of below average. And if you trash me on this opinion right here, I've personally never liked the Swiss, actually. I've just never liked the way it's felt. Your opinion on this may be completely different than mine, and you may think it's actually like top tier still. And if you do, that's completely understandable. So, the Carve. I remember when this weapon came out that people were really scared that this was going to be the next Cold War AUG, and thankfully it wasn't. Actually, it was nowhere even close. It's pretty bad. It does have like a match grade barrel, which does increase its raw damage. I think there is a way now to get a 2-shot burst with it, but it has to be like 5 headshots, which means that you basically have to land each set of bullets in the head, and that's very unrealistic unless like you're up close in front. So I think it's just kind of niche. Like, you can mess around with it. It's definitely not, I don't think it's garbage by any means, but you definitely need to be a decent player to make it work, to even get like at least 10 kills with it, you know. The Psychov. We're going to refer to this as its full auto variant. This is going to surprise some people. I'm going to look at this, though, from an objectively, like, multi-use purpose here. I actually think the Psychov is top tier, collectively, and here's why. Most people don't use it anymore, which it's just because, like, it doesn't have a hit as hard, though, but, I mean, when you think about the different ways to use this, like, the reason why it's so good is this. Number one is you can stack Tempered on a second loadout class. Like, so my main loadout is UG and PPSH. When I want to get my, like, if I can hit the load crate again, if I have my loadout, I get my, you know, Psychov Tempered. Just drop the Psychov, pick up the PPSH back up. Or if you're landing in on your loadout crate, and there's someone like camping it, you pick up the Psychov Tempered class, use the Psychov pistol just to down the guy camping it. I mean, it's got 80 bullets, it shoots really fast. Like, and it's definitely, if you land your upper chest shots to the head, you're gonna melt that kid pretty quickly still too. So because of the versatility that the Psychov has collectively, aside from the main damage profile in the weapon, I think it's just really good for what it can provide for you. So the 1911, this is the Cold 1911. I mean, it just sucks. It's never been good in any way, shape, or form. It's just not a good weapon at all. It's just trash. The ZRG. I used to love the ZRG. I'm pretty sure, and I think if I'm not mistaken, the ZRG, even after Vanguard launched, or the Vanguard snipers, the ZRG was the best sniper rifle to use at the time, and like you could just absolutely nuke kids across map with this thing. They eventually did nerf the bullet velocity, which was a little sad, because it definitely doesn't have that, you know, not like hit scan feel. I think it was like 1500 bullet velocity, something like that. But nowadays, just kind of like, I think the ZRG is still viable. I don't think it's as competitive anymore compared to some of the other weapons, but you know, you can mess around with it, you know, give it a try. I definitely think it's not like meta anymore though, unfortunately. The AMP 63. So I believe they actually nerfed this the last time they adjusted it, and I don't understand why. The amp was not something that people were heavily contesting and using over, because again, it only had 30 rounds in the mag, and it just like wasn't. I don't know. It wasn't like anything special. It was okay, but like I'm assuming that they nerfed it because they were afraid people were gonna start picking up on secondary again. That was because like the Psychov secondary was like obviously way too broken though, but amp secondary meta was never like a thing. But I think now, I think it's just below average. It's not trash by any means. It's just got 30 bullets is not enough though, but you can maybe down like one player with it though. But the Psychov pistol though, you could definitely get at least 2 downs with it for sure with the AR mag. Compared to the amp. So the nail gun. So like I said with the 725, where they actually buffed the sleight of hand reload speed time on it, they actually ended up changing the nail gun animation completely, and they made the reload speed faster. That went into effect the same patch where they ended up changing the health from 250 to 300 across all modes. And they changed the nail gun reload speed in that same time frame. I'm assuming they did that because they realized like, well, the nail gun is just going to completely fall off if like they don't give it some kind of slight buff, and that's what they ended up doing for it. So it was pretty cool to see. But I think the nail gun is kind of niche. If you're like a good player, yeah, you can make it work. But for 20 bullets, if you're not hitting your upper chest and headshots, I mean, you're gonna get wrecked with this thing, unfortunately. So definitely kind of fun to mess around with and use, though. I still have a fun time using it. So. The MG82, man, you want to talk about a weapon that was an absolute cannon when it came out? This thing. When this thing first launched, I remember people were going to plunder with it and showing off clips of them ripping people like 100 meters across the map with it because it had no recoil, insane fire rate, high TTK. It was broken. The MG82 was really good. Today, so I actually think it's viable. Kind of a weird thing. I think the MG82 is still pretty viable. The fire rate alone is what really carries this weapon. What you actually can do is, if you do stack mobility attachments on the MG82, you'd be surprised with how fast you can move with that. You can definitely use this in like many different ways, whether it's long range, mid range, or up close. The SMG variant that you can apply to this thing is actually like not as bad as you think it would as it is. So I think it's just overall like pretty decent to use still, regardless of the mobility on it. C58. So the C58, I think right now, I actually think it's pretty competitive. They have hit this weapon multiple times over, but if you understand how this weapon works at the moment, you know you're making it work pretty well. I've seen a lot of good KBM players use this, and they have been doing like really. We're talking, they're dropping 30 plus. One of my good friends, Arkham, like I watched him hit a 34 bomb with this on Fortune's Keep, and it was insane. Like he was just absolutely nuking kid to the C58. So I definitely think it's very competitive now in the current meta. So give it a try. You might be surprised. The OTS. I personally thought the OTS meta was very boring. I never liked it. It was just kind of like his gun just had like, it was just like fast, no recoil though, just kind of boring to use, but it was still pretty good. I think nowadays though, I actually think the OTS is still pretty viable. I know there's like a really gimmicky mobility build that's going around right now where people are people are making it work to some extent. So I definitely think you can still do well with it though. I just don't know. It's definitely just not as good as it used to be. You know, it used to be like the meta though at one point. That's for sure. EM2. Man, the EM2 single-handedly carried my Cadian Rebirth like a whole integer. Like it was insane. I loved the EM2 when it was in its prime. That was the same era where the Cold War AK and the XM4 meta, and the EM2 was up there with it. The EM2 is a little hard to use, But I mean, man, when you landed your shots, it was an absolute cannon. Since then, though, they have gutted this weapon over and over again. I think people have put it down for good. So, which is sad to see for me personally, but I don't think it's garbage by any means. I do think it's just below average. Maybe you can make this work in like a mid-range build because the damage is still pretty good on it, but you definitely won't like be using it for like long range anymore, that's for sure. So I think it's just below average at this point. The Tech 9. I mean, it's just trash. What were they thinking with this? There was never a reason to use the Tech 9 when it came out. This is when you knew they were kind of like running out of ideas for weapons to some extent. So don't use the Tech 9 ever. No matter if people tell you to use like the burst build or the full auto repeater, it's just not worth it, you know. Especially because that full auto repeater doesn't have a suppression on it. Yeah, that's out of the question for me. So the CX9. This is a tough one. So, personally, I actually think the CX9 is pretty competitive right now. The only problem with this weapon, fire rate, good. Mobility, good. There's different ways to kit out it has like that one barrel where you can like cancel your muzzle and just stack mobility and the rest of the attachments there. The problem with this weapon that I mainly have, aside from everything else on it, is the iron sights. I really don't like the iron sights on it because it just feels super weird out of place to use. So I feel like I'm forced to use an optic though. But when I do use this weapon in general, I have really good success with it. I think it's probably one of the most slept on SMGs in the game. If you pick it up, give it a try and see how you like it. Now, I think it's kind of a sleeper right now with how everything stands. So. Definitely one that I would rate for sure as being competitive. The Marshall pistols, absolute meta, like just not even niche. This is just a complete gimmick of a weapon here. I don't know what they were thinking with that. The Raw. This is my favorite LMG in the whole game. This is my favorite LMG, hands down, by far. Nothing else even comes close to it. And this is probably me being a little biased here, but I am going to just label it as viable. I'm not going to put it in the competitive slot. But aside from that, people think like, oh, you're crazy, whatever. Well, here's the thing with the Raw. Is the way I use it, I use the 4X, it's like the K498 4X integral optic, which gives you like a little bit more of a zoom than the 3X. And that actually helps you like control your recoil a bit more and you get better zoom on the targets. But it kind of has the same, it goes along the same lines of the PKM, where you can convert it to like the FMJ rounds with like the larger magazine that you can start using Combat Scout again. I think the PKM is just better overall than the Raw though, but the Raw I have a really fun time with personally. So I definitely think it's still viable, even though people say it sucks. They've never really used it to their full extent. They probably never unlocked for that matter too. So trust me, the Raw is not as bad as you think it may be. Oh, the AMP 63. Didn't we already do that one? Oh, I guess it's on here twice. Oh, that's okay. The Grav. I mean, so the Grav, I do think it has the best bullet velocity for the Cold War assault rifles, but the handling is just absolute trash on it. I think the one thing about this weapon that they needed to do was they needed to increase its damage a little bit. Like, if they had bumped up each of the profiles by like 1 point, it would have actually made the weapon pretty decent, but the handling alone was just so awful that regardless of the bullet velocity you have on it, there was never reason to use the thing. I think it's just trash all across the board. If you can't get used to the recoil on it, then it's just, what's the point, you know? No matter how good everything else may be. The Ironhide, probably the worst shotgun in the whole game. I mean, season 6 of Cold War was a very just disappointing and like boring time. Like, it was like just trending downwards so hard with how things were. The 2 new battle pass weapons were just completely trash. None of the, like, it was just like really bad during that time. The Lappa. This was probably the most slept on SMG in the whole game, hands down. Nothing like even comes close to it, in my opinion, at this point. In my opinion, the Lappa was really good for a long time, and then they finally caught on and nerfed it, which was sad to see. They nerfed the compact barrel. I think what they did was they nerfed that. They nerfed the overall base damage profile of the weapon, so like you could use the compact and the rifle to make up for some of that though, but it doesn't hit the same anymore. The TTK has gone up so much since the nerf that they unfortunately did kind of gut it. I don't even think it's below average now. I think it's kind of niche. Like they really did hit it pretty hard. It's just not like anywhere good at all anymore at this point. So if you're using it for OG's sake, and that's about, and that it is what it is. So okay, now we're on to the Vanguard stuff. Okay, the M1928, otherwise known as the Tommy gun. So I think they kind of buffed the Tommy gun recently. They made some changes to it. I think there's, if you were to use the recoil booster with the rapid barrel and the fire rate mag, I mean, I think it's just viable. See, the problem with it is that to make this gun really work, 50 bullets is not, because of the way you stack the other attachments together with the 50 round mag, you're chewing through your ammo so fast that it's only really effective for 1 kill. I don't ever see a situation where I'm getting 2 kills in the same mag with the Tommy gun, especially because you have to use sleight of hand on this thing too. If you don't, that reload speed is atrocious. I think they need to fix that still. I think it just, the real speed is too slow, even with sleight of hand on it. So, I'd like to see an improvement there. But overall, though, with the absolute best way to build this weapon, I think it's just viable at best. The Owen Gun. The Owen Gun was ridiculously amazing. Back when it like, you know, it was the rapid barrel and all that. I was checking my thing. Actually, one other thing too. This other thing too. Yeah, so they have that. Owen Gun nowadays, there's a lot of ways to build it. It definitely is not the same like it used to be, because they've just tuned down so many of the different profiles on the weapon. I mean, do I think it's competitive? Do we think it's competitive? Or viable? Personally, in the recent times I've used this since the changes, I've actually had pretty good success with it. I think it's competitive. It just depends on how you build it though. In order for this to, you know, be true, you have to understand the ins and outs of all the different attachments and like how to combine all the different like elements together regarding this weapon to make it work to its absolute maximum potential. So just my opinion on that. Type 100. I mean, this is absolute meta, 100%. The Type 100 right now is ridiculously amazing. It doesn't even matter if you have the 36 round. I mean, this is only assuming using the 36 round mag with the recoil boost and the rapid barrel. But regardless of like how you know, small the mag is, it is just absolutely meta still. I'm surprised they haven't actually made any changes to it. It's been a few months, I think, at this point now, to where it's been meta. The thing is, no one really uses it because, again, like 36 rounds is not like ideal for quads. But I mean, I still use it, and it's still a 20 bomb weapon, that's for sure. So, yeah, if everything else gets gutted completely, the Type 100 is always there as your backup, assuming they never touch it. As far as now, I mean, this is kind of a no-brainer here too as well. Everyone's running around with the Vanguard Ppsh. I covered the patch notes, the most recent patch notes, where they ended up removing the damage penalty on the 8mm Nambu round mag, which I think is a complete mistake. Like, you look at that and go, what's the point of using anything else then? Like, of course the weapon's going to be broken. It's just absolutely shredding kids, and the hipfire build is pretty much back at this point. They will end up probably, what they'll probably do is, it doesn't make sense to just completely revert that. What they may do is decrease the fire rate on the Nambu mag. That's the only thing I can think of, just to sort of balance it out. Less fire rate has a huge impact on TTK. So I think if they just did that alone, that would help a little bit. But right now, it's way too good to like not use. So the Einhorn, trash. I mean, I don't know. I mean, they've done some things to this weapon to change the pellet spread and all that, but I just think the problem with this weapon is you're too inconsistent with the shots in between, right? There was no way to really fix that, and that alone was holding it back from like its real potential. Especially because I do think this weapon also got hit with the shotgun nerf too, with the 20% reduction to all shotguns. I just don't think it's worth using it all anymore, especially because there's not a whole lot of ammo in it either. The combat shotgun. I mean, I made a video about this, about the combat a little while ago, and I actually had a pretty good game with it. But I do know that they ended up, they did hit it pretty hard in like almost all the different areas for it, aside from the damage, where they just like changed the mobility and the spread of some of the different things. And I think now it's just kind of below average. I don't know like how like it stacks up now with all the attachments combined together, but I don't think it's as good as, it definitely is not as good as it used to be. So the Gracie Auto, this is probably my, along with the Jack 12, like I really like this shotgun. And the surprising part to me is that nobody else used it upon launch. I mean, because the unique thing about the Gracie is that it's semi-auto with gung-ho. You just run around the map with the shotgun and just like mowing kids down. Now, I used the Gracie after the nerf, and I actually still did pretty good with it. I think the Gracie Auto is actually still viable. It's crazy to me how I never see anybody use it, and it baffles me. Like, it is very fun to use, even after the nerf. You obviously have to use the 7-round mag with the rapid barrel and the M97 like pellet spread or pellet condenser attachment, something like that. So, but give it a try. It's still fun to use. You obviously have to be really up close though to your target in order to make it work. So, double barrel. Thank God that double barrel is not meta anymore. My God, was that toxic. Just there was nothing fun at all about like just getting mowed down with the double barrel or the akimbo double barrel shotguns. Since then, though, they addressed it, they nerfed it. I mean, I think it's just kind of niche. I'm not even sure if it's still like one shots anymore with the akimbo up close. I'm assuming it doesn't. Otherwise, we'd probably still be seeing people use it. So, but I think it's just kind of niche now to use. MG42. So the thing with the MG is that it has a lot of gun kick to it, or visual gun kick, right? The recoil itself is not that intense, but when you stack all the attachments together, but it's just the way that you don't. My problem with this weapon is that like it doesn't feel like where I'm aiming at. The shots don't connect with this weapon too. Same issue with like some of the Vanguard Cold War snipers, where it was like I just couldn't get the bullets to align together with this thing. So is it a bad weapon by any means? I don't think so. I do think it's just a little below average, unfortunately, just based on like my experiences with it though. But maybe someone else will say like this is actually viable. But that's just my opinion though. The DP27. I think they buffed this. I think they buffed its range or something recently, or some recoil change they made to it. So the DP has been like one of those weapons where like, is it as good as like pre-nerf Bren? I don't think so. It's just got such weird handling to it. I think the weapon is cool. The damage profile is not terrible. It's just, again, the mobility kind of like holds it back, and the handling. The thing is, the barrels on the DP are so weird. Like one of them like reduces your horizontal recoil by like significant amount, but then like increase your vertical. So it's like, what's going on here? I can't figure out how to make couldn't figure out how to make this weapon work basically. So I'm just gonna put it as like below average. You know, it's decent ground loot, I guess, and that's about it. The STG. So I think the STG now is, I think it's still pretty top tier. If I'm being real, like it's still top tier. It's still pretty easy to use, no matter how you build it with the 3x optic or the G16. There's just a lot of different ways to make the STG work with the 60 round, the 50 round mag, and you know we still see people using it to this day. You know, it obviously was meta for a pretty decent amount of time, but I think overall though, like it's just like a really solid weapon to pick up and run with still. So I think it's much better than like other weapons by a mile, that's for sure. The Type 11. So they actually buffed the Type 11 recently. Wasn't the buff that I was hoping for. The Type 11 has never been a situation to where you'd ever consider running it. That's because what this gun really needs right now is they need to really tune down the vertical recoil on it. It's way too intense. Even when you completely kit out like max recoil reduction attachments for the Type 11, its handling just sucks all across the board. So I don't know, they need to make some like adjustment to that on that. If they adjust the recoil on the Type 11, I think more people would be inclined to use it. But until that happens though, I think it's just, I mean, I think it's actually, well, is it trash or is it like niche? I think it's just below average. I mean, if you put on the 45 round mag with recoil booster, maybe you can like make it to some goofy SMG build or whatever, but I don't know. But I don't ever see it being like a reason to use this until they fix some of the recoil patterns to it. The Bren. Talk about a weapon that they completely slaughtered to the ground. I mean, they absolutely gutted the Bren after it came out. It was meta for like what, 1 or 2 seasons, something like that. Now there's just absolutely no reason to use it. I think the Bren just straight up sucks now. It is just not good in any way, shape, or form. It's just really bad. M1 Garand. So I've been seeing people talk about this now a bit more, to where these tactical rifles are starting to make a little bit more of an appearance in game, especially the Garand. They specifically say in the patch notes that the Garand is not going to be like the DMR based on like the change they've made to it, but I have seen people like, I've been clapped by it a few times, so I would say that the Garand is actually viable now. I don't know if it can be used for long range by any means, but I know in the mid range, I think in the mid range area though, the Garand excels pretty well if you hit your shots consistently with it. So it is nice to see that, like, you know, these marksman rifles are finally getting some usage, because I swear to God, the Garand, SVT, and the G43 have been through 8 or 9 buffs, and like none of those buffs like made a difference at all, up until the most recent one, where like I think they all got bullet velocity buffs every single patch for the last almost a year straight, and they're just now seeing action, of course, like towards the end of Warzone's like history. So I don't know, they just kind of, they fell behind on this one in that category, and you know, a little late, but you know, whatever, it is what it is. SVT, I think I'm going to put this in the same area as the Garand, where I think now it's viable. Is it better than the Garand by any means? I don't think so. I think it just kind of depends on, you know, where you're at and what you're doing with it, in terms of like location and engagements. Definitely not. Maybe you can make this into like a decent like long range like mini sniper with like a sniper scope or whatever, but it definitely hits hard, that's for sure. But we'll have to wait and see if some new TikTok meta videos come out about it eventually after W2 beta hype dies down. G43. I need to look into this weapon again. The buff that they gave this recently, they gave this a massive damage buff. Like, I'm talking, I think the VAR range got like went from 31 to 35 or something like that. Like they gave it a pretty sizable damage buff overall. So Maybe the G43 is actually not terrible anymore. I'm gonna have to look into this one eventually. So it's hard for me to give an opinion on like what I think of this weapon now, because it does have a burst in full auto conversion, which do reduce the damage profiles, but because they buffed them, it kind of makes up for it now to an extent. So we'll have to wait and see how this looks. I'm gonna have to look into this a bit more. So I think for now I'm gonna put it as niche, but this one needs to be tested and looked into a bit more. Just people, like, everyone just kind of came to the conclusion that after these marksman rifles were just never going to be viable no matter how many times they touched them. I still think people look at it the same way, regardless of what they do now, because everyone just wants to use, like, the LMGs and the ARs, SMGs, so. Type 99. I've always had a problem with the Type 99. I just don't like the way the handling is on it. I don't know if that's just me. No matter how like hard I try to fix or how badly I try to fix the sway, I just never get this weapon to work for me. So, is it garbage though? I mean, I don't know. I think I'm just going to put it as below average. I think the handling on the Type 99 is what really just sets it back for me. No matter how hard, no matter how I kit it out. I know there's like a one-shot build people do with like the iron sights, which is kind of like, I would probably put this more of like an, actually, you know what? I'm going to put this more of a niche build. There is like a decent like iron sight build, like I said, that you can use to make it like somewhat viable, but I mean, that's just kind of like a gimmicky build. 3-line. I actually like the 3-line now. I know a lot of people don't. But I've actually found a build for me that works pretty well, where I have basically reduced all the sway from the 3-line, and it feels very good and consistent for me to use now. So I think that the 3-line is actually pretty competitive nowadays. I think you can use it and do well with it. Depending, if you were to use my build, you'd probably say the same thing with the way it feels. Like, you just think it just feels good and solid, and it definitely is one of the more competitive snipers for sure. R90 AK. I mean, I see a lot of people running this now. I think it's top tier for sure. I think the Vanguard R90 AK is very strong right now. This and the, I think it edges the 3-line a bit more, just due to overall like handling, speed, and mobility. The 3-line is meant for much like deeper shots, kind of like how like the HDR was back then. The R90 AK is much more forgivable on rebirth, mainly. So 3-line is really like if you're going for Caldera. You could still use it on rebirth too, but the R90 AK on rebirth right now is like really good, especially depending on how you deck it out. So combat shield, just kind of a niche thing, like with the monitor Riot Shield. The Rat pistol. So I know they've been making changes to the Rat pistol. I know they've been making changes to all these pistols here, but I haven't really been paying too much attention because, again, it's like a secondary. I think it's just kind of a niche weapon. The cool thing about this weapon though is that some of the magazines and the barrels on there are like, you know, they have like all the conversions or whatever. I know there's like one barrel in particular on the Rat that I think like really buffs up its damage profile, but I don't think it makes a difference either way, just because there's not enough ammo in the weapon itself. So, Automaton. Auto's in a good spot. I actually think the Automaton is top tier right now, as well with the STG. And there's nothing even too much to say on it. I think it's just solid to use. Good recoil, good fire rate, decent bullet velocity. You just land your shots consistently, and you're gonna get the down. It's as simple as that. There's nothing much more to it. Just a very basic weapon, and it's in a good spot right now. So. Top break. I think it's trash. I don't know. I just like, it's interesting to see how we've shifted out of like so many different metas and whatnot, to where people aren't gonna give any of these like secondaries any thought anymore. No matter how hard they may buff something, they're just never going to get regarded because overkill is just way too OP to not have at this point, you know? That's kind of why it's funny to me how they have all these pistols in the game, but they don't ever get used, you know? So it would be kind of interesting to think about, like, what if they ended up changing to where, you know, overkill is basically applied by default to everybody, meaning it's no longer a perk. And let's say they completely like sweeped all the SMGs damage profiles to where they were mid, but they made all the pistols super strong. Be curious to see how you know, the weapon selection pick rates are going to change based on that. Probably still be SMGs, but just something to kind of think about, you know, because you never see these pistols ever get used or talked about. You know, it's kind of fun to mix up once in a while. It would definitely help break the meta cycle if they were to find a way to kind of like reinvent the wheel in that aspect. So 1911 full auto. So this is actually I'm referring to the full auto build, obviously, like I said. I think it's viable. It's kind of fun, gimmicky to use. It's only good for like one kill though, but I've used it. It hits pretty hard. And I actually think they buffed it too. In the most recent, yeah, they did buff it. I remember that now. So it's even better than it was beforehand with the full auto barrels. So give it a try with the full auto. It's very fun to use. That's all I can say on that. Clouser, trash. They have done nothing but buff the Clouser over and over again, and it does not make one difference at all. I don't know. They needed to just may as well delete this weapon from the game as far as I'm concerned. Machine pistol. Again, same situation. The machine pistol, upon launch, was probably the worst weapon in the game. Actually, probably ever, for that matter, in initial state. It was so bad. Like, you literally could... I think if you put a full mag into somebody, it wouldn't down them. You actually ran out of ammo before you can knock the kid with the machine pistol. It was just so horrendous. I don't know what... And then I think they ended up buffing it and changing that, but there's just no reason to use it now. Or ever for that matter. Bazooka, I mean, just think all these here. Actually, well, okay. This one's a little different here. I actually think the Panzerfaust is pretty viable. The main reason being is that, like, it has that instant sprint to fire time, so it's like you can pretty much launch the rocket upon demand wherever you want to, so I think it's actually pretty good. I don't think any other rocket launcher in the game has that property except for the Panzerfaust, so that's something why I think it's viable. That's why you'll see like Habibi use it in his videos or whatever, so it is cool to see that like there is one launcher with some unique property. So the MK11, trash. Knife, trash. Don't care about that. I think we're now getting to... Oh, yeah, we're almost done here. Okay, Cooper Carbine. Cooper's had a very, very interesting history. At one point, I definitely... It was for sure absolute meta at one point. But nowadays... It is a top tier competitive. I don't see many people using it anymore. I'm gonna leave it as competitive for now. I think it's actually it's kind of hard for me to actually gauge the answer to this because I haven't been using it. I haven't really been using it at all recently. I know they've gone through like a bunch of different patches, whatnot, but I'm assuming that you can still drop a 20 bomb with it. Can you get a 30? Maybe, but I definitely think it's at least competitive. Is it top tier? That's up to you. You guys will be able to tell me much. You guys will be able to form an opinion much better than me if you've been using it. So, it's your burst. They've been trying to buff this weapon for some time to make people using it, but again, like it's one of those things where the burst weapons are just too hard to balance. How do you make something? So you know what? I've actually had this idea for a long time on what they should do with the burst weapons. What they need to do, especially with like the Cold War AUG, the FR, the M16, the Carve, just make each individual bullet that exits the barrel, make it throw in separate damage profiles. Make like The first bolt do 35, the second do 32, and the third do 29. I mean, maybe that sounds kind of crazy and far-fetched, but it's like, if you're so worried about, I don't know, having like people burst, and it obviously sounds like a pretty hard balancing thing, and maybe that's a dumb idea altogether, but it's just something different to try, you know. I have no idea. So, but regardless though, the Itcher burst, I think it's just kind of niche. I've never seen like anybody use this ever, no matter like how many times they buff it. It's just never going to be like actually, you know, acknowledged. The Garand. Okay, so actually the Garand, realistically, it's meta. It is very good right now. I've been seeing a lot of the pros use it, a lot of the big streamers have been using it. It slaps hard right now. Very good sniper to use. I think it has the highest bullet velocity for the snipers in the game right now. There's every reason to use it, so sorry. Yeah, I need to get on this. I need to give it a try at some point. I know for a fact that it is absolute meta. I know Metaphors have talked about it recently, so he gave some high regards to it. The bar. Man. This weapon has been... It was brought up to the spotlight, then kicked down to the curb. Right now, the bar is just not there. They ruined its recoil pattern for no good reason too. I don't know what they were thinking. Like, the bar when it came out was really bad. Then they ended up making like when around like season 3 or 4, they ended up giving a massive overhaul to its damage profiles and buffed it significantly. Then it started hitting really hard. They buffed its magazine size and all that good stuff, and then like it wasn't like absolute meta, but it was still like really good. Then they knocked it down again and took away all the recoil. It's like, well, what was the point then? So I think nowadays, I don't think it's trash. I think it's just below average at this point. Maybe it's viable if like, you know, you're a really good player, but I don't know. I just personally don't think that it's worth using anymore. AS44. So they recently finally addressed the SMG variant or SMG build that people can use. I was using this for a long time, where if you were to stack that recoil Falcon 50 round mag combination with Gung Ho, you were deleting kids up close, and they ended up tuning that profile a little bit. But even after that nerf that went out to the close range damage, I still think the AS44 is pretty competitive. If you build it up close, like it still melts like really fast. It has like 1300 RPM or something crazy like that. So regardless of like how hard they hit the damage on it, it's still going to be pretty good in that close range. And mid range to far for like an AR build, it's kind of hard to use still. I mean, I know they've been trying to like reduce that initial recoil on the AS44 for a long time now, but I don't know. I think you're gonna have, in order to make this work for long range, you need to have been using you need to use the weapon for a long time to understand how it really works. And like, I don't think people are willing to invest that. Like, that's the interesting part, right? Is this weapon on paper, TTK wise, is really good for long range, but nobody wants to spend the time or invest the time into like learning how to perfect it, because they could just pick up something else like an STG or UGM and have no recoil and just be done with it like that. And I think that's one of the most important things that like they need to realize, is that because the meta guns that have no recoil are always being picked, like there's no like mastery anymore. We have been through so many metas now where it's like it's just no recoil metas, right? Like, when's the last time that we've had a meta that actually took skill to use? NZ, no recoil. STG, no recoil. Bren, no recoil. I'd say the last time that we had that kind of meta was in Cold War with XM4, Cold War AK, and EM2. Those guns had some kick to it though, but these Vanguard weapons, just, there's no effort required. It's all just pull down and you're good to go. Have meta level 70, stack attachments, you're done. You're good to go. So NZ41. Obviously, this was meta for a while. Very boring meta. Did not really think it was that fun. And then they obviously nerfed it a little bit. I actually don't think it's trash. I think it's still kind of viable. It's definitely nowhere near as good as it used to be, though, obviously, like, because, you know, they've just kind of, like, toned things back a little bit, but it's definitely still, like, viable. It used to be really bad and horrendous. Like, I remember, like, when the gun, for the longest time, the gun's, like, recoil pattern was really intense, and, like, I remember one of the devs tweeted, it was like, it should not be like that, and they finally ended up addressing it. Now it's, like, in a good spot, I'd say. So the Volk, just when the Volk had its time to shine is when they hit it. When they made one of the big overhaul changes to all the weapons, the Volk's been getting buffed for a long time now, and, like, it was starting to creep up to that meta category. And then people were starting to figure out that it was actually really good for long range. Then they ended up, like, tuning down the long range profile pretty quickly, so you can't use it for that anymore. I was even gonna start. I kind of figured that out too. I was like, yeah, Volk long range was really good for a little bit. Nowadays, though, I think it's probably. So I actually think the Volk. I think the Volk is still top tier, though. I think it excels really well in that mid-range area. Like, I think it slaps pretty hard. I think a lot of people are still sleeping on it, just because of the problem is the SMGs now, like the meta SMGs that we haven't really gotten to yet, are just so good for mid-range sniper supports that the Volk has no real reason to, like, if they nerfed all the meta SMGs right now, the Volk would slide up for sure. That is without question, which is why I'm putting in the top tier selection. It's still, like, really good to use in that mid range area, basically. So MP40, I actually think that the MP40 is still top tier. I've been on the PPS stage for the last couple of days or so, and I've had the MP40 shred me a couple times. It's still pretty good. So I wouldn't sleep on it. And they've obviously, like, you know, gone through, we've seen this weapon go through a couple nerfs here and there. They went through and, like, changed the barrels, added bullet velocity to one, limb damage to another, or that was actually the short barrel, the short barrel. But even nowadays, the MP40 is still pretty good, so give that a try. The Sten. Okay, so the Sten. Okay, so I think the Sten is absolute meta. I really do think it is. The only reason that people do not like this weapon is the handling of it and the magazine that blocks the user's screen. Completely understandable. But aside from that, this weapon is fantastic. It is really, really good right now. Regardless if you use the 50 round or 36 round mag, it just melts. It's really good. And I think a lot of people, mainly people, just don't use it because of the magazine size, which is completely fair, especially on console too, like where your FOV is much more zoomed in because you're on AF compared to PC, which can go up to 120. It is a pretty significant difference in terms of, like, how much that does block up your screen. So I wish they would adjust that a little bit about the weapon, and it's sad they haven't done that yet. More people would be using this weapon for sure if, like, the magazine was not a problem. So hopefully they adjust it one day, but I still think overall, though, aside from that, it is absolutely meta, for sure. The well gun. I have mixed feelings about the well gun, and I don't know why. I feel like it's just, it does really well, and then it completely sucks. I feel like it's the main reason for that actually is that the well gun has like 7 or 8 damage drop-offs. It is weird. No idea why. But if that's just how they do it, that's how they do it. I think the thing with the well gun is it can feel really good and really horrible at times, and that just depends on where your opponent is literally standing. I'm actually going to put it as niche. Because the thing I don't like about this weapon is how it is completely dependent on your distance from your target. And that's what makes or breaks this weapon. So I don't like that. That's too situational. Like your skill level is not really going to be like relevant. And if your opponent is literally 1 or 2 meters out from like the closer range where the better profile is, then like it's just gonna suck. You know, like, you're gonna end up losing the fight. So I don't like that about the wall gun right now. Like I don't know why. If you go on like sim.gg or Dream Day, you're gonna see all the damage range drop off stats. It's just super weird. So KGM40. This was actually another. This was meta for a little bit. After they ended up buffing its damage profile a bit, which was much needed. I think right now it's actually probably in the perfect position. They don't need to touch it again. Is it top tier though? I don't think so. I think at the very least it's competitive. This is, I think, the Cooper and the KG subjectively can both be considered top tier. I just don't use those weapons though because I have no reason to at the moment. So, yeah, give or take, that's your opinion for that. But I think they're at the very least competitive. So, the Whitley's been getting buffs left and right. Its TTK is really good right now. The only thing I don't like about the Whitley is I feel like even when I stack max recoil reduction attachments, it still doesn't feel good to use. You know, like I've tried to learn the recoil power in the Whitley, but it just feels so inconsistent at times. And I'm actually gonna really say that it's more of a skill issue kind of deal because I'm saying that to some extent because it has a lot of recoil to it. But even then, it's like if your attachments are going to reduce your recoil, at least like make it noticeable. It doesn't feel like it's helping as much, or maybe I'm not using the right kind of build. I am using the 45 round mag on it, which is the best mag to use. But I'm gonna say overall, if you're a really good player, this thing is for sure top tier, without a doubt. It just hits hard. It's just like someone who, if you put probably like a week of effort to learn this weapon, it's for sure top tier, maybe even absolute meta. But that may be that's probably a bit of a stretch because it does only have 45 bullets. So, Vargo 52. If you know me, you already know exactly where I'm going to put this. I mean, listen, there's no doubt in my mind. The Vargo 52 is absolutely meta. And I've been saying this since day one of its launch, and no one's really believed me. I use the most obnoxious build on the planet with the Groove Suppressor, Task Force Barrel, the Speed Grip 6-round mag, and the Royal Cross 6x optic with the green dot. And for whatever reason, that optic revolutionizes this weapon and makes it like absolutely delete people. And everyone's thought I've been crazy for doing that, but y'all, if you've been watching my games the last couple months, you know that I have been shredding with it. And they've done nothing but buff it, which I'm all about. So, definitely the Vargo is for sure meta with the way I use it, 100%. So most people don't like the way I build it. I personally do. So, you know, give or take there, but yeah, if you've never used the Vargo or don't have it unlocked, go unlock it. For sure. So it's definitely one of the better weapons to use right now. Armaguerra. Think this is pretty much no brainer. It's definitely still absolute meta. The mobility on the Armaguerra is just really, really good still. I remember I didn't use it for a good amount of time. Then like I picked it up and I was like, oh well, yeah, I actually really like this thing. Even after they nerfed down all the scalar properties of the movement speed. It doesn't matter. This thing is still like really good and strong to use. This gun, the Armaguerra, like, you know, you have the ability to like convert to like a really fast build or do like a sniper support build. This current weapon right here is why the Volk is not going to like excel in that medium range, because the Armaguerra can like, you can make it to where there's no recoil, good fire rate, and it's just going to delete kids from like 20-30 meters out, you know. So M1916. This is that other tactical rifle, right? Yeah. So this is a niche weapon. The only build that I've found for this that's actually good is if you were to equip the headshot barrel, which is 20 rounds, with the full auto, and you just land straight headshots up close, you actually get a pretty good TTK. It's like 4 to 5 bullets to knock the player. Definitely decent, kind of weird to use, high skill cap, but it works and it's effective. Aside from that build though, I haven't found any other reason to use this thing. So it's just kind of like a niche weapon. Definitely, when I put this category as in like trash, it basically means that there's just no there's no good way to make these weapons work, period. No matter the situation that you're in. So, the Nikita. Nikita. I think the Nikita is a little slept on. I think it's pretty top tier. It kind of fits into, so they finally got to, I think the devs are happy with where it's at, in terms of just like its overall base properties. But I think what's holding the Nikita back though is, again, like it serves the same purpose as the Volk, where it's meant to be a sniper support. It's not meant to be used in long range, but these SMGs right now are fulfilling that sniper support role, and until they fix that, the Nikita and the Volk are never going to be looked upon though. But the Nikita ground loot feels pretty good. Recoil is not nowhere near as bad as it used to be. Good fire rate, decent profile. It's just a solid weapon to use overall, if you're in the medium range. But again, until they fix until like the sniper, these SMGs follow the medium range category, they're never going to be used. So the UGR. So I think the UGR is actually pretty competitive. They ended up giving it a nice buff recently. I think it's gotten like 3 consecutive buffs. So it got 2 magazine size buffs, range buff, multiplier buff, I think a damage profile buff too. They've just nothing but give love to this weapon. I used it after the most recent buff, and actually it felt pretty good. The only problem with the UGR that I have is that it feels like some of the animations on the sprint for it are kind of broken. I don't know if when you're sprinting with this gun, you're about to like ADS with it, it just feels all over the place. It doesn't feel consistent. It kind of like throws you out of whack and sync. So it's just, I don't know, it's kind of like a me thing, but you guys know what I'm talking about if you've used the EGR. So I definitely think it's at least competitive now, that's for sure. Blicky. I mean, regardless, it's still meta. It's still meta. You know, they are so afraid to gut this weapon to the ground. Let me tell you one thing right now. If they did not change the 54 round mag to the torso, I think this would actually fall the top tier. But because they see, like, I always use the 36 round instead of the 54 because I know that I'm going to be more consistent with landing my shots to the chest compared to the head. Like, and that's just me personally. But the fact that they changed that to make it where you 54 to the chest instead of the head makes it so like the gun's consistency in TTK is going to remain relatively high because of like the most common shot that people are a multiplier that people are going to land is in the chest. So the most center point, you know. And when you basically tag on 54 with that stat alone, it's going to make his weapon still pretty good. When they nerfed the Bergstrom barrel though, when they've nerfed the recoil in the Bergstrom barrel, that's kind of, I noticed a significant difference with the handling of the weapon. I actually use the grooved grip now to compensate for that lack of horizontal recoil, to help it to tighten it in, because horizontal recoil is way more important than people realize. Like, if your gun is moving from side to side, it's going to cause you to miss shots, and you're going to end up hitting like not the chest but the right or left arm, which is just lower damage. So Marco 5. I mean, again, this is still like absolute meta all across the board, and it's just still really good. I mean, the way I build it now is that like my build's kind of slow, but I use the 240 millimeter body barrel with 6.4 mag and lengthened with gung ho. So I stack all the recoil attachments, some mobility, some recoil, kind of like a mixture of a balance there. But I still do pretty good with the Marco. Definitely still in the meta category. UGM. So in the time of making this tier list, the reason that everything is ranked the way it is right now is because of just like what makes weapon absolute meta. The UGM. No recoil, big magazine, good damage, decent bullet velocity. I mean, there is no reason not to be using the UGM right now. It is for sure the best weapon, the best long-range weapon in the game. It's not even close. I think the Vargo 52 is right behind that. And you can even argue and say that the STG and the Automaton are not too far behind. And maybe if personal preference sake, if you think the KGM40 or the Cooper, can compete with that, that's up to you as well. But none of these other weapons here, like the Growl, the Kilo, M4, they just don't come even close to what you can do with the UGM. So yeah, I think the UGM is just the best weapon in the game. The Vargo S, so they buffed it recently. So I made a video about this weapon where I actually used it as like an SMG, and I actually had pretty good success with it. I actually think the Vargo S is kind of viable. It's not trash. It actually hits pretty good. The problem I have with this weapon is that the recoil pattern is just so wonky and weird. It has like a weird shift that like slants up, and it's just kind of like weird to figure out, if that makes sense. It's good in like the medium range. You can't use it for far engagements, that's for sure. So, but I definitely still think you can do well with it now, or do decent with it. The EX1. I mean, this gun was meta for a day. There was the infinite hit scan glitch, or with the sniper build, where you could just one shot from any distance, then they patched that instantly. They need to do some serious tuning to this weapon, otherwise no one's gonna take it seriously. And this weapon right here is a great example with how up to date the COD community is. Look at how fast the EX1 died out 2 days after its release. Nobody used it. Like, these devs need to understand that the Warzone player base now has become much more aware of like what you're doing. Everyone literally knows everything. That's kind of why loadout videos in general have died, because everyone's covered everything, and there's nothing else new to go over. You're not tricking the bots anymore. Essentially, everyone just kind of like knows it's run its course in essence there. So yeah, I don't know what they were thinking with this. So, and I get why it's undertuned. They didn't want this to be game breaking by any means, so it makes sense. But come on, if you're gonna put a laser gun in the game, at least make it a little decent to use. That's all I'm saying. Last but not least, we have the Raw 225. I think it's meta. I think it's pretty good, actually. That's if you're using the recoil booster, the fire rate barrel, and the the 38 round mag. It's pretty good up close. Mid range, a little harder to use, depending if you have like recoil attachments. Maybe it's not as bad, but I definitely think though that the Raw is for sure in the meta category. So yeah, I mean, okay, so I guess we went through everything. So aside from that, let's take a look at what we have here. It's so interesting to see like how things have shifted and evolved. Like, it's weird to think how like most of these different options here, like at one point this was meta, at one point this was meta, at one point this was meta. It's just so crazy to see like how everything has shifted and changed over the last couple of years or so with all the different adjustments that Warzone's been through. And I believe as of right now, there are only 2 more weapons coming out, and I'm not even gonna like bother remaking this because this took a long time to do. Obviously, it's like 2 hours of recording, but there's 2 more arrows coming out, and then after that, that'll probably be the last of the Warzone content that we get to see. So, yeah, I think this list is pretty solid though. Let me know what you guys think down below. So, if you think something else should be like shift in another direction, that's completely up to you. But I think overall, I think this looks good. I think this is obviously just my opinion with where everything stands. So, this is a strange category too as well, where all these different weapons here are just so like unique in their own way. The reason that the weapons end up in the niche category primarily is because how they've been treated over the course of time. Like, if you look at almost all these weapons here, like the Deagle, it got a buff, but it's a secondary. M19 pistols used to be meta, but then they cut. It's still like you can halfway use it now. M82, it's just kind of like, it's semi-auto. Maybe you can make it for quickscoping. Crossbow is that. Then the AUG, Cold War, Stoner, Gallo, like all these weapons have been through such a weird, maybe not the ice, so the ice was just kind of like weird in general in my opinion, but you know, they've just made drastic changes to all these weapons here, and so I don't know, they just don't like seem good. But then down here, like everything here just kind of like sucks in my opinion, and should just never be used or considered because you're just never gonna do well with any of it. And then like down here it's just I don't know, the weird niche weapons. So yeah, I don't know. Did the best I could to try to cover everything. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to drop a follow. If you've made it this far up until this point, this is literally like a 2-hour long video of me covering every single weapon in Warzone, but I kind of figured I wanted to do this just to get my final thoughts about everything and just talk a little bit about the history of some of the metas and all the good stuff. So be sure to subscribe. That'd be super helpful. I'm trying to push 1,000 subs as fast as I can. I definitely want to start streaming on YouTube more now. I don't think I see myself going back to Twitch. Actually, I want to like get this platform, you know, moving fast in the right, moving fast for myself, and some growth, accumulate a little bit more over here. That's for sure. Before Warzone 2 comes out. So, yep. Again, all the support. I appreciate everybody watching. You know, be sure to drop a sub, like I said. And aside from that,